All right, picture this. You're the leader of a tiny little nation, and the world's greatest superpower is on your doorstep demanding total loyalty. So what do? Do you bend the knee and survive? Or do you stand up and risk everything? Today, we're diving into the incredible story of King Hezekiah, a ruler who had to make that exact choice. I mean, it's the ultimate underdog story, right? And it brings us to the big question we're going to tackle. How in the world does a small kingdom, a little speck on the map, find the guts and the strategy to defy the most powerful empire of its day? Let's get into it. So to really get why Hezekiah did what he did, we've got to go back to around 715 BCE. We need to understand the world he inherited, which was a kingdom living completely in the shadow of a massive, terrifying giant. And wow, just look at this. The difference between him and his dad, King Ahaz, is like night and day. His father played it safe. He submitted to the Assyrian Empire. He paid them off. He even turned away from his own people's faith. Hezekiah's plan? Yeah, he basically decided to tear up his father's playbook and do the exact opposite. He chose rebellion in his politics and in his faith. And this right here is super important to understand. Judah wasn't actually free. It was a vassal state. That basically means they had to pay protection money to the Assyrian Empire just to be left alone. So Hezekiah wasn't really a king in the full sense of the word. He was more like a regional manager for a foreign empire. And let's just say he was ready to quit. So what's his first move? You might think he'd start raising an army, right? Nope. He does something way smarter, much more strategic. He kicks off what's now known as the Great Reform, a complete, top-to-bottom spiritual overhaul of his entire nation. And you've got to realize, this wasn't just about religion. It was a brilliant political move. He knew he couldn't take on an empire with a fractured country. He needed everybody on the same page, united, and he decided that a shared faith was going to be the glue that held them all together. And man, he did not mess around. He was incredibly thorough. First, he reopens and purifies the main temple. Then he goes on this kingdom-wide tour, tearing down all the local shrines to other gods. He even smashes this famous ancient relic from the time of Moses because people had started to worship it as an idol. The bottom line? Everything, and I mean everything, was now centered on Jerusalem. Okay, so his people are unified. The spiritual foundation is set. Now it's time to get down to the nuts and bolts of preparing for a war, because he knew the Assyrians were coming. This wasn't just wishful thinking, this was defiance by design. So for a whole decade, Hezekiah plays the long game, quietly building up his strength. Then, the moment he was waiting for, in 705 BCE, the feared Assyrian king Sargon II dies. This was the signal. Hezekiah and a bunch of other vassal kings saw their chance and teamed up to break free. But, the new Assyrian king, Sennacherib, he was not about to let that happen. By 701 BCE, his armies were on the move. Now, the Assyrians were absolute masters of siege warfare. Their whole game plan was to surround a city, cut off its food and water, and just wait for it to starve. Hezekiah knew this was their playbook, and he had an incredible engineering marvel up his sleeve to counter it. He ordered the construction of what we now call the Siloam Tunnel. And get this, 2 teams of workers started digging through solid rock from opposite ends and met perfectly in the middle. It was a brilliant feat that redirected a vital spring from outside the city to flow inside the walls. Water problem? Solved. And the most amazing part is that you can still walk through that tunnel today. Archaeologists found it, along with an inscription from the workers celebrating its completion. This is real, folks. This isn't just a story. All right, so the stage is set. Jerusalem is fortified, the people are united, they've got a secure water supply, but now the main event. The full, terrifying might of the Assyrian Empire arrives right at the city gates. And Sennacherib's invasion was just brutal and fast. His army rolled through Judah, crushing city after city, leaving a trail of pure devastation. Pretty soon, Jerusalem was the only place left standing, completely surrounded. You have to imagine, hope was probably running pretty thin. And we know exactly how confident the Assyrian king was because he wrote it down himself. This famous line from his own royal records is just peak arrogance, like a bird in a cage. For him, the fight was already over. Victory wasn't just likely, it was guaranteed. Okay, but this is where the story gets really, really interesting, because the two historical sources we have tell very different stories. On the one hand, the Assyrian record boasts about trapping Hezekiah, but there's a huge piece missing. It never actually says they conquered the city. Then you look at the biblical account, which describes a dramatic, miraculous event where the Assyrian army was basically wiped out overnight, forcing them to retreat. So, what really happened? I mean, this is the question historians have been wrestling with for centuries. Was it a miracle, just like the Bible says? Or maybe a devastating plague, like dysentery or cholera, ripped through the crowded Assyrian camp? Could their supply lines have failed? Or maybe some political drama back home forced the king to pack up and leave? The truth is, we may never know for sure. But whatever the cause, the impossible happened. Jerusalem was saved. But hold on, the story doesn't end there. After the greatest triumph of his life, Hezekiah came face to face with his most personal challenge yet. Yeah, the scriptures tell us that right after this incredible victory, Hezekiah became sick, like deathly ill. Can you imagine the irony? You defy the world's biggest superpower. You save your entire nation, and then it looks like you're about to be taken out by an illness. But the biblical story continues that after he prayed, his life was miraculously extended. He was granted another 15 years to rule and to really solidify the future of the kingdom he had fought so hard to save. And that really brings us to his legacy. Hezekiah did so much more than just survive. He gave his people a renewed sense of purpose, a new identity. He's held up as a model for leadership and faith. And what's so powerful about his story is how it's this incredible blend of biblical narrative and hard archaeological evidence. Which leaves us with one last fascinating question to think about. What was the real game changer that day outside the walls of Jerusalem? Was it a miracle from above? A microscopic enemy inside the Assyrian camp? Or a political emergency hundreds of miles away? The answer, well, that remains one of history's great mysteries.